All right. Hello, my name is Joshua Stanton, and I'm about to give a presentation on log-based monitoring systems. This is my security project, and as an introduction, I'm just going to briefly go over what a log-based monitoring system is and how the term is used today. So, log-based monitoring systems just means we're logging data, we're logging events. So we're recording all these events in the system, and we want to use those events somehow. Traditionally, these were applied to debugging, right? So something happens in your system, and you want to be able to track down why something happened so you can fix a bug or increase the functionality, something along those lines. Today, this is used much more in the security field, and that should be pretty intuitive. So if something happens in your system, you want to be able to say that where did this come from? Why did this happen? Who is accountable for this? And logs help out with a lot of this. Um, so the modern market in computer security is filled with what are called log-based monitoring suites. So it's tools that allow you to monitor logs in your system. But then you can also do a lot of different things with those logs, which traditionally weren't used before. So these in the free market, right? These companies are competing with each other. We're going to look at a lot of these tools in detail, and some of these tools are very useful, very essential. Some of them are tangential, but still very powerful in some situations, and some of them are not so useful. They're not really related to logs very much. They're just like little bonuses that come in, and I don't think you want to pay for them necessarily if you're looking for just a log-based monitoring system. So we're going to distinguish between those three different groups. So here we have a list of the different tools we're going to be looking at. The first type of tool is real-time event correlation. This is a very important tool, and we're going to go into it more later, but just know that it's key for a lot of these other tools coming in later. They build off of this. We have the ability to search log data. Searching log data is a little bit more complicated than it sounds. You might think it's just looking through your logs, but when you have that much data, you want to be able to comprehensively look at this stuff. You should be able to get what you want out of this data. So the metadata that's used to store that is actually very important. Because imagine it's not easy to look at the logs that you have. It's not easy to get what you want. And then all of a sudden you have a terrible log-based monitoring system. So real-time remediation is very important, and it's related to real-time event correlation. We'll get to that later. I don't want to mention it too much here, but I'd say it's one of the most important developments in log-based monitoring systems since their inception. File integrity monitoring, very important tool. In some situations, it also helps out real-time remediation, and it can help out some other things related to log-based monitoring systems. The USB Defender has to do with USB drives and stuff like that. It's really a small detail, but it's being offered by a lot of these suites as included with the log-based monitoring system they're trying to sell. So I thought I'd include it here. Scheduled searches. Scheduled searches is another tool, and we get into more of that later. And the threat intelligence feed. A threat intelligence feed is it's a powerful tool. Just know that alright, scratch that. Here we have a threat intelligence feed. Threat intelligence feed is not very powerful. I'm not a big fan of it, but it is. We'll get to why I'm not a big fan of it later. Just know that it is related to real-time remediation as well. Here we have forensics. Forensics is very important, and forensics, this is just log-based monitoring system aiding forensics. It's not like it's doing all the forensics on its own. We also have automated reporting. Automated reporting is related to... I'm not a big fan of automated reporting. We'll get to why I'm not a big fan of that as well later. In any case, here we go. So here we have real-time event correlation. Real-time event correlation is automatically looking through the events that are coming up and putting them together to make important connections without any humans involved. So this is very important because before humans had to go through and look for certain things, and you're still going to have to do that, but that took up a lot of time. And now a lot of the grunt work can be done by the computer, it can be automated. This is especially helpful for detecting intrusions, that sort of stuff. So we'll get into later what you have once you detect the intrusions, what you can do once you pick up those logs. But just the ability to do it in real time as it's happening gives you a lot of power, as opposed to traditionally logs were looked at as something you look at later. You take this data and you store it somewhere, and then later you look back through it if there's a problem. Now we can do stuff with it in real time. So a core part of most monitoring suites is this real-time event correlation, and we'll get into later all these different things that will add on to it and utilize real-time event correlation. So next we have the ability to search log data. This is another one of those core components. It's always been there pretty much. It's just how well it's done, right? So these suites have been getting better and better at adding metadata to your logs. And be like, here's a way to look at it. It's all about the presentation and about the utility of how can I get to the data I want specifically. Another way of looking at it is how can you construct meaningful synthesis as quickly as possible, but within this data for what you want, right? The time you spend searching for the information is basically wasted time when you could be using that time doing something else. So it's all about saving time for the system managers. All right, real-time remediation. Real-time remediation is built off of real-time correlation. It's an automated response to certain events. So if something happens in your system and you want to do something about it in real time, that's what real-time remediation is. Alright, so let's say you have an attacker. Before we were talking about intrusion detection. Let's say you detect an intrusion. What can you do about that? Because if you can't do anything, you're not important. Well, at first, real-time remediation is you alert people, right? But you want to be more active than that. So real-time remediation is you can restrict their privileges, their permissions of the user who is a threat to our system. We can also do some other things. Like, say they're trying to get into a specific part of our system. We could perhaps disable that completely. Or perhaps they're trying to get specific data, but we have that backed up somewhere. We could just remove that data. And some of these are drastic actions, but it's important that we can do them in the case that this is, say, very secure information, which we don't want getting out at any cost. It's important that we can take these actions immediately, as soon as a threat is detected. Right, we can stop them in their place, hopefully. So this is a very important security measure, and I would say probably the greatest part of advances made in log-based security monitoring systems is this ability to respond immediately, this remediation. It's very important, that automation of the process. So next we have file integrity monitoring. So file integrity monitoring is saying, let's take some files that someone is trying to access, and when they access that, when that log is done, we store lots of logs related to the changes that they've made, all these sorts of things, so that if they mess up the file, or if something happens, or if somehow they get access when they're not supposed to, we know who did it, why they did it, or not necessarily why, how they did it, I should say, not why. We know what the changes they specifically made were, and we can change it back. So we ensure integrity. One of the most important aspects of security, computer security. We can help maintain integrity of files and file systems. So that's an important extension of log-based monitoring systems that a lot of people I feel don't think about. They think mostly of security in terms of getting some sort of intruder, or they think of debugging. But the fact that we can manage files sort of through logs is very important. Now, a weakness I'm going to mention real quick is that there's a lot of overhead when managing these sort of files, especially if they're very large and you have a lot of them over some amount of time. They're going to it's going to be bad. It's going to take a lot of processing. You're going to have a lot of space just storing all these logs. So you're going to clear that out after some amount of time, of course. But if you have enough room, I think it's worth it, especially if it's data you want secured. So next we're going to talk briefly about the USB Defender. I'm not a huge proponent of this, but it's important because I saw it in a lot of places when doing research. You're talking about how, so if you connect a device, you connect a USB device to a system, you get physical access to it. There's a log made of that, but also the remediation can use USB Defender to say, I don't want this USB device, I detach it. Now that's great, that's really important, but I don't know if you want USB Defender in your suite, in your log-based monitoring system. It should just perhaps be something separate, or something that you should be able to program your own ability to detach the drives. I don't think it's a big deal. So it's sort of fluffy, just on not important, not essential. So there's that. But it can be useful, right? If someone gets physical access, there's very few ways of stopping that, and this could be one of those ways. So that's is important in that regard. Alright, so next we have scheduled searches. And these searches, they're automated checks that, while they're not directly related to real-time correlation, they do help out real-time remediation and automated reporting, especially automated reporting. So this is just the searches we were talking about earlier. It does that on some sort of schedule, some sort of basis that you've set up, and stores that information. So that's important for getting logs and what those logs look like at a certain time. But most logs have timestamps. So I'm not... It mostly is just there to help out automated reporting. I feel like it just takes the human out of the equation. And I guess it's good in some ways. It's another big time saver. But otherwise, it's just sort of like a term marketing I feel like it's come up with to try to sell on this one point that's really a very small feature of the system. Other than that, there's really not a lot to say about it, except when we get to automated reporting, I'll mention it again. Otherwise, not a big fan. Then we have the threat intelligence feed. The threat intelligence feed is another extension of real-time correlation. It's a very small part of it, though. Basically, you put up a little tray on your screen, and it'll say which threats you have. If you have a low-level threat and you don't want to take immediate action, but you want to alert someone, you alert someone in this threat intelligence feed. And this was another important marketing thing that these suites were talking about a lot, where they were saying, you will know when something has happened. You will have these threat intelligences will be fed to you. And I don't think it's that important. I think if it's a high enough threat, remediation should take care of it and will alert you. It's a low-level threat, they're still going to alert you. This is just one way that the alert is being done. So, their intelligence feed is not as big a deal as people make it sound. But it's not harmful, I suppose. It's just a term given to alerting the administrators when there's like a security threat. So next we have forensics. Forensics is a big, broad term, and there are a lot of tools. It's not easy we're talking about very specific tools. Forensics is very big. Forensics is saying, let's look at this data. Let's look through it with some automated tools, as well as some tools that humans can interact with, and say, who is responsible for this? What is responsible for this event that has occurred? This result, and this is one of the most important parts of log-based monitoring systems. So I really like forensics. I'm a big fan. Um, I think it varies between system to system, but this is something you really want. Um, any tools that can help with this, because it can be a long and painful process looking through all that data. You want all the tools you can get at your disposal to help look through it and see who's responsible and help improve the accountability of users in your system. So there's that. Alright, next we have automated reporting. This automatically generates reports that can improve an enormous they can improve and make an enormous time save for your system managers, because if the higher ups want reports on some sort of regular basis, and you don't want to spend an hour making them every day or however often you're supposed to make these reports, you could just have the system automatically generate them. And some of these automatic generators are not so great, but when they are good, this can be an enormous time save, which is why, even though it's not a core part of the logging, it's really not related to logging at all. You can have automated reporting for anything. You can have automated reporting for any tool set that people want to know about how it's doing. It's still helpful. It's still a helpful thing. Alright, so that covers all of the tools that I wanted to cover. And I'm briefly going to go over what makes these tools essential. So, the real-time correlation, the real-time remediation especially, the ability to search log data, and forensics, these are all tools that you want in your package. If they're not there, or if they're weak, right, like if the ability to search log data isn't so good, you're going to want another suite. You're going to want another log-based monitoring system, because these tools are by far all you want. This is really what you're doing with it. Everything else is just built on top of it to help aid these tools, or they're not very useful. They're just little time-saving things like automated reporting. So, like I said, these are all key for one reason or another. Next, we have situationally useful things. So, like I said, automated reporting, situationally useful. If you have to give a lot of reports, this is a huge time saver. File integrity monitoring is another pretty useful thing, in that when you have it's just something that's not related to logs specifically, or generally it's not related to logs, but when it is, like in this case, if you have a good file integrity monitoring in your suite, it could be helpful. It could be really helpful in increasing the security of your system and take the load off some other security product that you're running. And it depends on how the overhead is handled, but like I said, it's situationally useful. And then threat intelligence feed, I'm not a big fan of the threat intelligence feed. Not a big fan at all. But you still want it, right? You want the remediation to alert you. I'm just saying I think it's mostly a marketing ploy. I don't think it's just a very tiny detail of the system. If we talked about all the things forensics does, all those, if we give them all fancy names, I could add another 4 or 5 tools to what I'm discussing here. That's sort of what it feels like. But the threat intelligence feed can be useful. You want to alert everyone, so it makes sense. Then we have what's not useful. So I'm being a little cruel. I'm being a little cruel when calling these not useful. But the USB Defender, scheduled searches, automated reporting, they are not fantastic tools. I mentioned automatic reported twice, but sorry about that. I'll put it again. I'll say it again because automatic reporting might not be useful at all. It depends on your situation. But regardless, USB Defender scheduled searches, you're probably going to want to do those with your own tools. You're probably going to want to get that utility from somewhere else. I don't know why you would want that in this sort of suite. It doesn't really make sense to me. Okay, now in conclusion, logging is useful for security, and most changes are automated ones. Logging will continue to be useful, although the term is becoming connected with a glut of tangential or totally unrelated features as I was discussing, stuff like USB Defender, all these sort of other things that they're sticking into these suites. That's not really important. What is important is logs are still increasing the security of systems everywhere. They can be used for debugging purposes, forensics purposes. They're going to continue to be used. Especially with remediation that's come in recently, or relatively recently, the more that gets automated, the more powerful a tool it'll be. And that's my presentation. Hope you enjoyed.